Why hello. So today I'm going to be doing my worst books of 2020 video. Even though 2020 sucked, I think a lot of people had a really good reading year, and I had a pretty good one myself. But of course it couldn't be perfect. So these are the books that just weren't it for me. And they are in no particular order. I hate them all equally. The first book on this list is Kill Creek by Scott Thomas. On paper, this book is everything that I love. It's horror, it's a haunted house book, and it follows a group of writers as they spend the night in said haunted house to prove whether or not it is truly haunted. Unfortunately, while I did think the writing was good, I just couldn't connect to any of the characters. I felt like the main character was so bland and boring. And because we spend so much time in the main character's head, that just made it difficult for me because I didn't like him, so I didn't want to hear his inner monologue. I didn't want to follow him. I didn't care what happened to him really. While the side characters were definitely more interesting, I did not enjoy Scott Thomas's portrayal of an oversexed female character. I kind of just felt like he was living out his fantasies, and just something about it rubbed me the wrong way. The biggest thing about this book is that it's pretty long. It's over 400 pages, and I just didn't feel any draw during any of it. Like, I just felt so bored. I didn't feel like there was ever any suspense or any buildup that really paid off. And yeah, ultimately this book was not scary. And if you're gonna be marketed as a horror book, you better be a little bit scary. So yeah, unfortunately this book just wasn't for me, but I do own Scott Thomas's other book, Violet. If you guys have read it, and if you wanna give me like any comparisons to Kill Creek, is it better? Is it scarier? Does it have more interesting characters? I'd really like to know that. The next book on this list is Petals on the Wind by V.C. Andrews. This is the second book in the Dollenganger series, which begins with Flowers in the Attic. This is actually a bind up of both of those books. For those of you who don't know, the first book, Flowers in the Attic, follows the Dollenganger family, which is a family of 6, until one night, tragically, their father dies in a car accident, and their mother, who has always been a stay-at-home mom and has no education or any sort of skills, has no idea what she's going to do for money. So she decides to take her 4 children back to her family's estate, which she hasn't been to since before they were born, because she was disinherited whenever she ran off and married her husband. So the mom's grand plan is to make her father write her into his will so that she will inherit a fortune and that she can take care of her family. However, she does not want her father to know about her children because he hated her husband so much. So she hides them away in this attic and promises that it's only going to be for a few days or a week at the most. And then that turns into like 4 or 5 years. While I did enjoy Flowers in the Attic, I did not enjoy Petals on the Wind. This story follows the Dollengangers as they have grown up and they have escaped the attic, and now they're trying to make a life for themselves. And it's basically just full of smut, and it's not good smut. And it was also so long. Like, both of these books are long, like over 400 pages. And it was just a lot to get through. But overall, the writing and the plot of this book, I just felt like it was such a departure from Flowers in the Attic, and that's why this book had to be on this list. The next book on this list is The Amityville Horror by Jay Anson. This is a book that is so well known in horror literature, and that's because it was released in the 1970s and supposedly based on true events. The story follows a family that moves into a house that they claim to be haunted, and they live there for about a month before fleeing and telling their story in this book. Now, I really don't know if this book is based on true events, but no matter what, this is such an icon in horror literature. Like, who hasn't heard of the Amityville Horror? It is branched a franchise of movies, and it's just very well known, so I wanted to finally pick it up. Unfortunately, I did not like this book at all. It was short, but it took me a while to get through because it just wasn't well written. Like, seriously, whoever edited this book, I just want to punch in the face. There are so many exclamations throughout this book, and it just took me out of the story so much because you don't say, you know, let's go walk the dog. Would you like some Cheerios? People don't talk like that. And it just took me out of the story so many times and made it very hard to get back into it. And ultimately, it wasn't scary. And for this to have the blurb, this book will scare the hell out of you. It's just like, come on. Come on. And I know this was released like 40 years ago, but I just have a hard time thinking that people even thought this was scary back then. In the end, I'm glad that I've read it and that I can say that I've read it, but I'm pretty sure I'm never going to be picking this one up again. The next book on this list is actually a graphic novel, and it is The Last of Us: American Dreams by Neil Druckmann and Faith Erin Hicks. I was so excited to get my hands on this graphic novel because I played The Last of Us Part 1, the DLC, and then The Last of Us Part 2, all within the span of like less than a month. And I absolutely fell in love with the story. So when I found out there was more content in graphic novel form, I wanted it so badly, and I couldn't find it at a decent price for several months. But when I finally found it for a good price, I bought it immediately, and I was just so excited. Unfortunately, while this is said to give you backstory on one of the main characters in The Last of Us, everything in this story is something that we've already learned from the video games. I also just wasn't a huge fan of the artwork. Like, if you look at this, it's a no. But then you look at this, and it's just like, why don't they make the artwork like that? Why don't they make it more realistic? This is my style. This is what I like to see. So overall, I was just incredibly disappointed because I had searched for this book and tracked it down, and I was so ready for new content, and it just didn't deliver. And for it to have had the creator of The Last of Us video games involved, like, that really hurt. I'm not gonna lie. The final book on this list is The New Girl by R.L. Stine, and this is the first book in the Fear Street series. And the reason that I found it so disappointing was because this is the first book in such an epic series that I loved as a child. But it was just not good. It was just not good. First of all, the writing in the story. The edition that I read was a reprinted edition that the publishers wanted to modernize to appeal to a wider audience. I hate when they do that, and I especially hate it when they do it wrong, because while they would mention more relatable musicians for teenagers, they would not change the technology, and the kids would still be listening to cassette tapes, and it was just like, what are you trying to accomplish here? Confusion? Because you got it. I also just felt like the story was too short, and the plot was interesting, and it could have been really, really interesting if it had been fleshed out a bit more. I do realize that I'm not the target audience for these books. I wasn't the target audience when it was released in the 80s because I wasn't born, and I'm not the target audience now because I'm not a teenager now, but I still just feel like, I don't know. It could have been done better, especially for being the first book in a series that got so popular. In the comments below, I would love for you guys to let me know what your worst books of 2020 are. All of these books are backlisted books. I did not read many 2020 releases this year. So if you read any of these, I would be surprised, but please tell me because I would love to know your thoughts. I would also just love to know any books that you read this year that were terrible. Like, honestly, what books sucked for you as hard as 2020 sucked for the world? All right, guys, so that's all for this video. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I will see you in my next one.